November 1979, and Yes are falling apart in Paris. The band and noted Queen producer Roy Thomas Baker were creating a follow-up to the Tomato album. Far from the romance of Paris, the Marcadet Studios are situated in a rough area on the edge of the city, next to a huge motorway and a noisy train line complex. The band have made reference to the trouble that they had driving to these studios, which they were actually the first band to use. There's a dozen or so songs from these sessions in circulation. Now, whilst not exactly the holy grail of unreleased Yes music, they are an interesting addition to the Yes catalogue. Very few of the Paris tracks are true group collaborations, and as a result they end up sounding like a collection of B-sides and solo material, some of which they did actually end up becoming. Producer Baker tended to discourage group performances and favoured individual tracks being laid down separately. This again gives the tracks a kind of formulaic and one-dimensional feel. And that said, they are demos, and perhaps if the tracks had been allowed to develop more, they would have sounded more rounded and more memorable. Anderson seems to dominate the session writing, and as a result many of the tracks have a jovial and whimsical quality, with lyrics often steeped in medieval imagery and historical references. Perhaps the band took some kind of solace in their former glory as the shadow of punk crept across the landscape. Squire Howard White's involvement is minimal, and as a result the songs have a lightweight quality. Certainly some of the tracks do show promise, and weirdly they've grown on me whilst making this documentary. Let's take a listen to some.
Days gone by, days gone by. Have you seen the order and the coming of the golden age, when all our hearts will know the everlasting days? Love will pour throughout the land as never known before. The meeting of the ways on this day of days. I just wanna tell you everything, the quality of days of old. But the story has a sense of timelessness and glory. 'Twas in the golden days of Equator de Coloram, the Lord of Might, the King of Justice, all in all a gentle master. Oh, days gone by, days gone by. There are times way back in history where valor overcame the almighty tyrants of the past, forgotten overlaid, as the sons of righteous leaders bent on crushing nations, thus believe their spirit just. Richard set to sail the seven seas. With the power held within him, he could feel the need to reach out far and touch on all who came to the resting place named Oberon, where he had been. Set us free, set us free. just secured by the stroke of a brush, curled around the warm feel of the paint that he trusted so well.
I think that had this album been released onto the venomous new wave world, it would have truly sank like a stone, and certainly if Anderson's desire to add more harp playing to it had been allowed. The album was created against a backdrop of financial arguments, mainly Anderson's allegedly huge spending and general dominance in the band, and there was also an ongoing feud between Squire and Anderson's wives, again over money. However, it was ultimately an injury to drummer White's foot that became the catalyst for all concerned to quit recording and leave Paris. Howe, Squire and White returned to England and set about developing a more dynamic and aggressive sound, perhaps a reflection of both the anger and the freedom that they now felt. Anderson soon caught up with them and spent the January and February of 1980 supposedly working on the tracks Tempus Fugit, Does It Really Happen and Run Through the Light. But gradually he turned up less and less to these sessions. Wakeman meanwhile stayed in Switzerland and only committed to overdubbing tapes that had been posted out to him. Howe, Squire and White were now left two dilemmas. They had an American tour that had not only been booked but was now completely sold out. They therefore only had a few months not only to complete an album, but also find a committed singer and keyboard player for the live shows. In case you haven't guessed already, this is why the album is called Drama. As fate would have it, Yes manager Brian Lane also managed the new rising synth-pop stars Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes, otherwise known as the Buggles. To both Yes and Lane, the solution to their problem seemed obvious, and they invited Buggles, who were Yes fans, to meet the band under the guise of being possible songwriting partners. By spring 1980, with Anderson and Wakeman seemingly not returning, Howe, Squire and White began developing new and existing material with the Buggles duo. At this point, I'd like to dispel the notion that Drama is not a proper Yes album, and in doing this, I'd like to pose the question, which lineup exactly constitutes the band Yes? Prior to Drama, this band had released 9 studio albums, spread across 5 different lineup combinations with 9 different musicians. Perhaps we could all agree that the Anderson, Howe, Squire, Wakeman and White is probably the most consistent and generally considered classic lineup, but which of these members is essential to the overall sound? And how is it that most of the band's most critically revered and most commercially successful moments were created without this classic combination? I would argue that in terms of the style and structure, Drama is very similar to the Yes album. Perhaps the band had this in mind while they were making it. I mean, like the Yes album, Drama was viewed as a new beginning. and one vital to the band's survival. Both albums share a similar crisp and dynamic tonal quality. This was something that Yes seemed to lose over the years, especially when you compare it to the more muddy and somewhat muffled sound of Going for the One and Tomato. In recapturing the punchy spirit of early Yes, Drama has the sound of a confident and emboldened band that sound like they're actually enjoying playing the music. Credit for the superior production on Drama firstly goes to Eddie Offord, who returned after a 2-album absence to work on the initial Drama recordings. Secondly, bringing a crispness and a focus is engineer Hugh Padgham, one of the architects of the stylistic change in Genesis. However, I really think it's Trevor Horn that must have been at the forefront of the Drama decision-making, as the album bears all of the grand and punchy hallmarks that would go on to make him one of the world's most influential and distinguished producers. Our album opens with the brutal and cinematic epic that is Machine Messiah. This opening leaves us in no doubt that this new version of Yes are taking no prisoners, but the acid test is the vocals.
And down the street where the glass shows that summer has gone.
To disguise the absence of John Anderson, the track cleverly layers and cuts between different vocal tracks, blending foreground and background vocals by Horn and Squire, so that one isn't quite sure exactly who is singing.
Waiting and watching, the tables are turning. I'm waiting, I'm watching. I need to be back.
The lyrics evoke images of Orwellian technology, with the satanic mills coming from William Blake's description of our industrial Victorian factories. In another bid to keep old school Yes fans happy, an organ solo appears early on in the track. Whilst not exactly the midsection of Close to the Edge, it does provide a pleasant relief from the onslaught of Howe's ferocious opening. This section is a nod to the notes of French organist Charles-Marie Windor. Both Jeff Downes and Alan White have both staked claims to being the main writers of this song, but there's no doubt it's Steve Howe who triumphs most, with a vast array of guitar styles and tempos. It's not that dissimilar to his sprawling and aggressive playing on Relaya's Soundchaser, but here it's done with much more precision and control. Relaya, incidentally, was Yes fan Trevor Horn's favourite Yes album, and it really shows here. The lack of Wakeman's keyboards affords Howe some much welcome breathing space on this album, with Downes providing shade and subtlety to Howe's aggression. The bulk of the Drama guitar parts were actually recorded by Howe on his own prior to these sessions, but you'd never know this. They gel together with his bandmates brilliantly. If Awaken is Yes's yin, then this is their yang. A thunderous opener, with an eye on the emerging heavy metal scene. I think it's one of the best tracks of this band ever recorded, and the perfect mission statement for 1980s Yes. White Car fulfills a similar role to what Clap did on the Yes album, a short breather following a frenetic opener. The title is supposedly a nod to synth-pop pioneer Gary Newman, writer of the classic Cars track, and also owner of a white Chevrolet Corvette. It's a brief respite that's over almost as soon as it begins. When played live, it incorporated some Downes solo pieces within it, but here it's its simplicity that's its strength. The track makes extensive use of the Fairlight synthesizer, with all of the strings and keyboard effects being sampled through it. With a cryptic and possibly drug-related lyric, Downes creates a sense of anticipation and appetite, which is more than filled with the astonishing bass opening of the next track.
Man in a white car.
This track is dominated by Squire's intricate and taut bass playing, and White's thunderous cymbals. The song is thought to originate from the early Going for the One sessions that involved Patrick Moraz, and an early take from this was included on the Tomato CD reissue. Certainly Anderson can be heard on this early recording, but it bears all the hallmarks of Chris Squire's writing, and it's not that dissimilar to his previous Parallels track and his later It Can Happen on 90125. The track concludes with an abrupt ending and then slowly fades back in. However, on subsequent CD reissues, this end section simply cuts back in without the fade. To be honest, I feel that the track would have provided more anticipation for side 2 had it simply just ended with the final Together vocal line. In the wrong hands, this quirky number could have ended up sounding like the cartoonish train wrecks that are Circus of Heaven and Arriving UFO. As it stands, however, it's a fantastic number that skips through different sections with a focused precision. Drama studio engineer Hugh Padgham must have had a big involvement with this track, as it bears all the hallmarks of the crisp, gated drum sound that he would employ with other bands. The track is one of several that have been written by Buggles just before them joining the band, and the duo re-recorded this track in a slightly more reflective and melancholic style for the second Buggles album.
Memories, how they fade so fast. Look back, there is no escape. Tie down, now you see too late. Lovers, they will never wait.
It's a shame that the brief, reflective intro on this track wasn't explored more by this incarnation of Yes. Following this intro, Horn enters with a vocal section that was left over from an existing Buggles song. This part is perhaps the most confident and assured of all his vocal deliveries, stretching the upper range of his voice to the limit.
I ask my love to give me
her, and all she offered me were dreams.
This track has the distinction of employing Trevor Horn and not Chris Squire playing bass. Instead, Squire plays a piano and it can be faintly heard underneath the Hound-dominated middle section. These weird images that you're seeing, by the way, are mostly from the Drama Tour programme. This is a heart-pounding climax with blistering power trio playing from Howe, Squire and White. In the tradition of Sound Chaser, going for the one or release, this track is thrown at the listener at breakneck speed. The song received some radio airplay around the time and still packs a punch today. The promo video for the track was recorded at a warehouse owned by Michael Tate, the band's tour manager, and utilises some of the stage equipment and lighting that was used by the band on stage. On release, the album received largely positive reviews and reached number 2 in the UK charts and 18 in the US charts on release. In contemporary interviews, Jon Anderson admitted liking the album. He praised the new members and seemed to be proud of the input that he'd had into its early development. If a criticism of Drama can be made, it's that in its mere 36 minutes it does come across a little sparse. Certainly when one considers the wealth of music that the band recorded around this time that wasn't used. After a 3-year absence, the cover sees the return of artist Roger Dean. Reflecting the situation of the band at the time, it depicts a huge iceberg with a sunken ship, possibly reflecting the career of the band at that point. Seemingly escaping from this ship are 3 black cats, presumably Howe, Squire and White, and 2 birds. These birds could be interpreted as Anderson and Wakeman or Downes and Howe, depending on if you see the cats as chasing them away or welcoming them. The Drama Tour began in Toronto in August 1980, before moving on to America throughout September and October. Most of these shows had been sold out prior to Anderson and Wakeman leaving the band. After a rousing opening with music from the Close Encounters movie, the set burst into Does It Really Happen, and then proceeded to move through a mixture of old but mostly new tracks. There was nothing played from Topographic, Relayer or tellingly the recent Tomato album, with only parallels from Going for the One being played on some nights. Horn admits that his vocals were stretched beyond their limits on tracks like And You and I, but on the whole he sounds okay, and the rest of the band are in their usual blistering form. The UK leg of the tour coincided with the release of the Yes Show's live album. The original release date for this live album had been a year earlier during the Paris days, but it was postponed due to band arguments over the track selection and mixing. Some tracks played on the Drama tour and recorded around this era pointed to the way a post-Drama album could have panned out. The punky Go Through This was played on each night of the tour. Telephone Secrets, Crossfire and Satellite were all demoed by Howe, Squire and White in early 1980. Vermilion Sands and the powerful multi-segmented Fly From Here suite were Buggles songs that were originally destined for Yes. It's easy to see how these tracks could have become a 1981 Drama follow-up, but this wasn't to be. The Drama lineup faded almost as quickly as it arrived. Interviews from the time paint a picture of a frantic, nerve-wracking experience, something that those involved, especially Trevor Horn, just really didn't want to repeat. Instead, Horn tied up loose ends with Downes and created a second, final Buggles album. Then Downes moved on to join Steve Howe and form the highly successful supergroup Asia. This left Squire and White at yet another crossroads in the Yes journey. In 1981, the duo teamed up with Jimmy Page and Green Slate keyboardist Dave Lawson to form a band called XYZ, ex Yes Zeppelin. Several demo tracks exist from these sessions, and there's a belief that Page is in a position of much more studio quality material. The few fragments that we do have are very much in the style of Drama and present era Zeppelin. The sessions are said to be the foundation blocks for some of what became 90125, and almost all of the recordings were recycled over the next few years, including Mind Drive on the Keys to Ascension album, Can You Imagine on Magnification, and I'm Running on Big Generator. The only formally released track from this immediate post-Drama era is Squire and White's Christmas single, Run With The Fox, but I think the less said about that, the better. In 1983, yet another incarnation of Yes would reunite with Horn on the 90125 album, but perhaps less known is that the producer invited Steve Howe to play on some of his other projects, notably the band Propaganda and the Frankie Goes to Hollywood album Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. Howe's acoustic playing on Pleasure Dome is obvious in the album's epic opener, but he has also claimed to have played the bass on the decade-defining Two Tribes track and many other Frankie tracks. There's much mystery over who exactly plays on this album, with Horn thought to have created the music by sampling a variety of different musicians, including Ian Jury's Blockheads, Steve Howe and Trevor Rabin. I'd be surprised, however, if Squire and White don't also feature somewhere on this album. In fact, it was Chris Squire who originally suggested to Horn that he should produce this band in the first place. The whole Drama lineup would reunite many years later for the Yes album Fly From Here Return Trip, recorded with Horn's vocals. Fly From Here is a superb and very worthy successor to Drama. It takes that original demo track, nervously presented by the Buggles writer some 30 years previously, and transforms it into a wonderful side-long Yes epic. Looking back on the late 70s Yes, I can totally understand why some people were adverse to the polished and commercial sound that many bands were succumbing to. I can also see why some fans were fearful of Buggles joining Yes, and resented both the Drama album and ridiculed the live shows at the time. But all things must pass, as they say, and by the end of the 70s, that incarnation of Yes had just literally ran out of steam. John Anderson's importance to the Yes story is not in question, and it's arguably unrivaled. but I do think that Tomato suffers somewhat from the choices he no doubt forced onto it. There's no doubt to my ears that this band improved significantly with the Drama album. Anderson's reluctance to sing any of the Drama songs live is a shame, as it denied the tracks an exposure and longevity that they deserved. As a result, in its immediate aftermath, Drama somewhat faded away from importance in the Yes story. Over time, however, its stock seems to have risen considerably amongst fans, with a crisp and contemporary sound that doesn't seem to have dated in a way that other Yes albums have done. Unbeknown to the band at this time, the coming decade will see them reach not only new highs commercially, but also new depths in terms of band acrimony. Their own internal drama is just beginning.
That was a great take, apart from a couple of places.
I heard you on the wireless back in 52, lying awake intently tuning in on you. If I was young, it didn't stop you coming through.